Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to do another cartridge comparison. We're going to do 338 Winchester Magnum versus 340 Weatherby Magnum. We're going to compare ballistics, a little bit about the history, and which one might be better for you, or maybe you should avoid them altogether. In 1958, Winchester released the 338 Winchester Magnum, and it was dubbed as the Alaskan cartridge. And I gotta say, it seems like that's kind of stuck, that it is the Alaskan cartridge. A lot of people call it the ultimate elk cartridge. And I'll say this, I think this is a pretty darn efficient Magnum. So what's the parent case to this bad boy? Well, it's the 375 H&H. What you can think of it as is a shortened 375 with the shoulders blown out and its neck down to 338. So the case length, not including the bullet, is 2.5 inches. And so it fits into a standard length action just like a 30-06. Now I just said it's a fairly efficient Magnum. Now why I say that is, well, it can push a 225 grain like this AccuBond, depending on the barrel length and what powder you're using, 2800 to 2850. It is a real performer. Now the 338 caliber is very versatile, a lot like 30 caliber versatility. And the 338 Win Mag is fairly versatile. Lightest bullets you're going to be shooting is like the Barnes 160 grain. And you could definitely get that 32, maybe 3,300 feet per second. And you could shoot something like a 200 grain like that Spear at over 3,000 feet per second. And if you really wanted to, you could load this thing with a 300 grain bullet. Now, you're going to be probably going around 2,400, maybe 2,500 feet per second. So I don't think it's the ideal bullet. I think the ideal bullet range for 338 Win Mag is probably 185 grain up to 225 grain. All right, let's open the Hornady reloading manual, obviously because I'm a huge Hornady fanboy. I get a lot of people telling me that, surprisingly. But let's go ahead and look at velocities. I want to show is a 250 grain. All right, we are topping out around 2,700 according to Hornady. I think you can get 2,750, but as I said, 250 grain I think is about the heaviest you'd probably want to shoot. As I said, in 1958, Winchester introduced the public to one of the first 338 cartridges. And so it didn't take long, actually only 5 years, before Roy Weatherby decided to one-up Winchester. So what did Roy Weatherby do? He nicked up his 300 Weatherby to 338 and called it the 340 Weatherby Magnum. And of course, in 1963, it was the most powerful 338 cartridge made. Let's just get this part out of the way. Recoil. Well, if you guys thought the 300 Weatherby was a kicking mule, don't ever shoot the 340 Weatherby. It's the younger, roided up sibling. I have both the 300 Weatherby and a 340 Weatherby in rifles roughly the same weight, and the 340 Weatherby kicks way harder than a 300 Weatherby. With this being a Weatherby, this cartridge must be fast, right? Yeah, it is. Let's talk about its performance. With a 225 grain, like the Barnes TTSX and a 340 Weatherby, with the right powder, you can get 3,150 feet per second in a 26-inch barrel, of course. And remember, the 338 Win Mag, you're pushing around 2,850. Quite a big difference. As for 250 grain bullets, which I definitely think the 340 Weatherby is much better suited for the task over a 338 Win Mag, you can push it mid 2,900 feet per second. And again, with the right powder, very close to 3,000 feet per second while staying under 65,000 PSI. Now, I just recently shot the 250 grain AccuBond with IMR 7828 SSC and was getting almost 2,950 feet per second at a 5/8 group. Not too shabby. One little quick funny story about the recoil with the 250 grain AccuBond. Right before I shot this load, I was shooting a muzzle braked 6.8 Western that is extremely pleasant to shoot, almost no recoil. And then I switched to the 340 Weatherby, and it was shocking, the recoil difference. All right, we're going back to the Hornady book for 340 Weatherby, mostly because I think it's the closest. Let's see here. 200 grain at 3,200 feet per second. That seems about right. A 225 at 3,000. In my experience, with a lot of powders, your max is 3,050. And with a select few, you can get 3,150. Of course, while staying at 65,000 PSI. Then the 250 grain. They're saying 2,900. Huh. If you guys remembered, I only shot 83 grains and got 2,940. So, very interesting. And you might be wondering, how on earth are you not extremely overpressure when Hornady says you should be only getting 2,800? Let me show you. For those that have never seen, this is what Gordon's reloading tool looks like. Now, obviously, the indications you're going to see are going to be on your brass, your bolt lift, your primer, but there's some really good brass and it doesn't always show. What I do is put in my cartridge, water grain capacity, the case length that I loaded it to, the barrel length, the bullet jump that I have. Yep, that's your Weatherby free bore. The bullet I use, and the powder I'm using, and the amount. I'm R7828 SSC. Now, GRT has been very good at almost being dead on with my 340 Weatherby, but I did have to calibrate it just a tiny bit. And this is how much pressure I'm seeing when I shot my load at around 39 feet per second. 64,465 PSI. And the important part is I have a very full load ratio, and more important, 100% burnt propellant. So I do think this load could be a winner. All right, we're on to the ballistic chart. Let's start with the 338 Winchester Magnum. We're going to use a Barnes TTSX 225 grain. I do think both of these cartridges excel with 225s. It does have a G1BC of 515. Muzzle velocity, we are going to dial it back a little to be a little more realistic, because usually you don't get your best accuracy at your max. So 2,800 feet per second, 3,918 foot-pounds of energy at the muzzle. It's almost 4,000 foot-pounds. That's pretty crazy. 33 foot-pounds of recoil. That's a lot. 270 Winchester has around 20. All right, 200 yards. Still have 3,000 foot-pounds of energy, and zeroed at 100, 3.5 inches of drop, out to 400 yards, 2,133 feet per second. This is at sea level, by the way. 2,274 foot-pounds of energy, and 28.9 inches of drop. Let's step up to 340 Weatherby mag, 225 TTSX. Again, we're not going to hot rod this. I've personally taken my 340 Weatherby almost up to 3,150, but we're looking at energy 46, 48 foot-pounds. So already 700 more foot-pounds of energy than a 338 Win Mag. And guys, this is the reason why 340 Weatherby never took off. And honestly, why 338 is kind of a dying caliber. It's too much. The average Joe, after one shot, will not want to shoot a 340 Weatherby ever again. All right. 200 yards, 3,600 foot-pounds compared to 3,000. Not a huge difference in drop. Now let's take it out to 400. Bullet's going 200 feet per second faster than a 338 Win Mag. And you have about 500 foot-pounds more of energy than a 338 Win Mag at 400. And then 5 inches less of drop, 23.4 inches of drop. At the end of the day, Would I recommend either one of these? Yes, if you got that little special crazy in you and you really like pain, sure. 338 is awesome caliber. It is an incredible caliber for North American game. And these two cartridges would be incredible for anything in Alaska. But you got to be able to withstand the recoil and be able to shoot it accurately. And that's why I think 338 is dying in popularity. People, well, are kind of wussies and don't like recoil.